Excellent. Okay, so we're here with Carl Bessai, Director of Coal. Thank you so much, Carl, for giving us a little bit of time to talk about the film and your time working in Lytton.
My pleasure. I hope I can remember everything. It's a lot now. It's 10. What is it? 12 years ago or something like that. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
it's a little bit because it played at the 2010 Kamloops Film Festival. I think
Sure.
it came out sort of towards the end of 2009,
Yep.
something like that, or
Yeah.
hit the festival circuit.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it would be a little bit, but we expect that you remember every detail of your time.
Sure.
So I guess just starting from the beginning with Cole, how did it sort of come to be for you? How did you get brought into the project? How did
Well,
that?
I actually got invited into the project by the producers, a bunch of young guys that I knew, one of whom I'd worked closely with, Jason James, one of the producers, and a couple guys named Dylan Collingwood and Kimani Ray Smith. And they had this script, and it was written by a young American guy, and he had written the film to be set in what was kind of his hometown in upstate Michigan. So he'd had a very very American kind of point of view, and also I think a sort of prescient story about race, about conflicts within families, and we all loved the script. We thought it needed to be sort of rethought a little bit in terms of trying to transpose it into a Canadian space. So that was the first job. So we spent quite a bit of time working with the writer, trying to make it fit more into our milieu, and then we started looking for a great place to make the film. And I grew up in Alberta, so my knowledge of BC was less than some, and I had not been to Lytton before, and I had shot in Cache Creek and in that area, Ashcroft. I love that kind of deserty landscape, but then when we were on our way there to look at some of those spots, and we came to Lytton, and Lytton's that wonderful place, and kind of just as the mountains start to kind of give way to some of this drier landscape and the confluence of the Thompson and the Fraser, I mean, it is a beautiful part of the world. And there was this crazy old garage that was still sitting there by the side of the road, looking like a perfect place to shoot a movie. And it turned out to be the hangover from the film The Pledge that Jack Nicholson had been in. That I think was Sean Penn, I want to say, directing. I can't remember exactly. But The Pledge was shot there. They built a whole set, which was a series of buildings and a kind of, gas station. And then the indigenous community got kept the buildings, just kept the things going, and then ran the garage. So when we went and toured the location, I didn't know any of this at the time. I was just like, these buildings are great. This is like a perfect, place to shoot this movie. But I noticed that in the kind of house, there's no power, and there was no plumbing, and there was like none of the things you'd expect in a house. And I'm like, what's up with this house? And because the house was a movie set, it was a very nicely built, interesting. And also because it was a movie set, it had like wide doors and lots of windows. It was really set up to be lit and shot, but you had to bring your own power. There was no, running water, whatever. Anyway, it was amazing.
So from what you're saying, you guys were kind of on your way to look at some other locations and stumbled across this? Is that?
Well, it was part of the plan to see a bunch of different communities. And as I say, a few years previous, I did a film that was set primarily, or part of it was set in Ashcroft. And I just fell in love with that kind of deserty landscape. It's so not like the West Coast. It's just so different. And so moody, and I liked the town, and the town was old. And so I had thought this would be kind of a great place to go and look. So yeah, it was in sort of putting myself in that direction, and that we found our way to Lytton, which is really a smaller place. Was a much smaller place at the time, and just a better place. And as I say, I had not seen the way it's perched on the rivers, and the way the rivers join in that spot, and the bridges. Oh, it's so cinematic. And when we shot the film, we had city scenes as well, so we had a component of the film shot in Vancouver. But we just moved out there, lived in a little motel, and on weekends I would just stay up there, and we drive around in the old truck that we used as a vehicle, for Cole, his truck in the movie. We drive around in this old truck, have the camera gear in the box, and we just pull over and shoot landscape. I shot so much landscape in this film, and not all of it's in the movie, but a lot of it is, and it's addictive and beautiful. The landscape, it had a kind of, it was alive. It was amazing.
Oh, very cool. Well, yeah, it definitely plays a huge role in the film, the location. What in Lytton, where was your favorite place to shoot? Was it the house, or was there a particular location that you really
Yeah, and if you kind of go up the mountainside a little bit beyond the town, sort of past where the garage was, and there was this beautiful kind of rolling mountainy hillside, very dry, and you'd have these amazing views back of the valley and the town, and the wind was always blowing. I mean, the wind was always blowing there, but again, just such a cinematic way. It wasn't like gale force, but it was a constant presence. It was like a spirit in the valley, I just really enjoyed being up in the hills and looking down at the spaces, and looking down at nature, and you can really see the way the trees and the kind of mountain landscape sort of gives way. It starts to breathe into this sort of drier landscape. It's a really specific place in the world, where you almost see two environments kind of mingle together, and I loved it.
And how did the community receive your film crew? How was that experience, sort of, getting to shoot in places and utilizing locals, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think we were pretty small. It was a pretty small group, so I think we had a respectful, low key kind of participation in the community. We promised to buy all our gas from the gas station, so we did that. We spent a bit of money there too, so everyone who stayed up, and we did have a lot of people staying there. We were sort of like a band of tourists almost, but it was it was a very mellow, laid-back place, and it was easy to manage. And people were super kind, but we weren't a monstrous film crew. It was really quite a small movie with a small crew. So I don't think we upset anyone particularly. Sometimes movies have a tendency to have a really big footprint, and I didn't want this film to have that kind of footprint. I wanted it to feel like it was part of the town. So that's why we wanted to stay, really sort of just be in the place and see how it kind of spoke through the movie.
And how long was the shoot, and split up between Lytton and Vancouver?
I guess the total shooting number of days was like 22, 23, something like that. And I think we spent 4 or 5 in Vancouver. So it was mostly up in Lytton and on the roads and in the valleys and stuff. And as I say, I spent a lot of extra time just in those weekends looking at landscape and trying to situate the film. You just sit around waiting for trains to go by in the valley. You just sit around and wait for what's the river look like right now. I mean, I don't know. I'm a bit of a junkie for that stuff. I love the nature, just sitting there in nature and kind of participating with a camera. That's really great.
And casting of the film, how did that sort of come to be and happen?
Well, one of the producers, Dylan, managed the young man who plays Cole, who's also so he's the lead actor. Richard DeClercq is his name. So he came with the project. It's a project that he wanted to make. So they had found this as a vehicle for him together, and then the trick was to put a cast around him. We found a really nice cast. Like, again, one of the producers was a talent manager, and so Sonia Bennett was one of his people, and she plays Cole's sister. Candace McClure is the lead of the love interest, and she was a little bit late for us to connect with. I think she's South African born, Vancouver-based, lovely and wonderful actor, and I think she had been in a big TV series, and so it was difficult with her schedule and whatever. But we got her involved. The young boy, Rocket, was just a find, just this lovely kid. He's probably a big grown man now, but in the movie he's this darling little guy. And my own daughter was born fairly, maybe a year previous to us shooting, and so I put her in the movie as the baby of Sonia Bennett's baby in the film. Her name is Evangeline. We call her Evie now, and I look at Evie and she's 5'7" now. It's a sort of marker of my life a little bit, and I think that's one of the reasons I love the movie. I was doing some digging around and looking for pieces and putting some demo stuff together, and I went back in previous to our conversation. Went back in and was looking at the film, and I love this movie. I actually think that the movie is quite lyrical and quite beautiful. I love how we shot it. I love the world of the movie, and the acting's very good. And I think we achieved that by just really bringing everyone to the town and letting them be a part of the town. And so it doesn't feel like fiction so much as it has a sort of a documenting of the world kind of feeling.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful.
We played this film in competition at the Moscow festival in Russia, one of the years around the time it came to Kamloops, I'm sure. And it was kind of awesome to show the movie to this crazy, very foreign audience. A Russian audience is nothing like a North American audience. Everything's different there. And it was really well received. It won a jury prize. The audience just really loved the world. I don't know why it spoke to them, but they loved it. They loved this film. It was an interesting experience.
That's very cool. But like they say about stories, right? The more personal you kind of make it, the more universal it becomes, right? So yeah. I think everyone's had that conflict of having bigger dreams than sort of their immediate circle can kind of comprehend, and that sort of thing.
Well, this was the writer, Adam. It was his story in that sense, and he was very open about that. He'd had this sort of some similar conflicts in his life and a similar kind of upbringing, and that old it's a story you've heard a million times, but we'll keep telling it forever because it's this coming of age experience of a young person trying to find their voice, and what does that mean, and he enters the world, and we all carry our baggage and our families with us, and I thought it was interesting. So
and so and you've touched on a few different things, but was there in those sort of initial, when they sent you the script, what was sort of the main aspect that grabbed you and made you go, yeah, you know what, I think I could do something with this?
Well, I thought it was interesting that the Black family was the haves and the white family was the have-nots. I thought the racial stuff was interesting, and at the time kind of original to me. I thought it was a little bit, something I hadn't really worked on or explored. Not certainly my film experience. So I like that kind of racial tensions, racial issues. I thought that was important, and I think we can see how important these topics still are. They will always be important, So that grabbed me for sure. And I liked the spirit of a young cast. I've always really responded to actors, if you catch them at this point where they're really coming up in the world and trying to explore their own voice. I felt that this young man, Richard, who played the lead, was very much at that place in his life, in the same way that the writer was. And so being able to tap into those truths and have them influence the story was also one of the first times, I think, I used one of the newer digital formats to shoot. Which was something I was a bit dubious about at the time. I remember I'd always kind of stayed with film. I was like kind of a film guy, film purist, and and we shot with a Panasonic system that was fairly new at the time. And I was really concerned about having it look and feel, have that subtle kind of beautiful cinema feeling. That the landscape deserved it. But it was a budget question, and it was just also kind of where the times were. Film was becoming more tenuous, and digital was on the rise. And I had this great guy who helped with the color. Gary Shaw is his name. He did the transfers and the color correcting. And yeah, I really like how it looked. I really like the kind of warmth of it, and the way the landscape is just sort of embedded in every scene in Lytton. It sort of feels like a landscape movie. So I like that. That was interesting.
Well, and digital probably played into those weekends, being able to go out and shoot all of that footage on film. Probably, you would have had to be more limited and really go, okay, we need this particular shot, and wait for that, as opposed to being able to be out there and shoot a bunch.
Yeah, it was looser for sure. It was definitely, yeah. And I think it was one of the first times I used two cameras as well. I mean, this is something we do quite often now, but back then it was, film camera, you would be using one. You didn't roll two cinema cameras at the same time. It would be crazy. It'd be broke in a week, and this time we had, we were shooting on digital cards, and we've got two cameras rolling. And so, from the point of view of physically, the technique of making the movie changes when you bring two cameras into play. As I say, nowadays that's pretty common. It's pretty much every director is, pretty standard using a couple cameras at the same time. But for me, that was new and novel and interesting, had its challenges, but mostly, yeah, I got to that town, which is so sad about the town. I mean, because I got to that town and I thought, this is a gem of a town. This is a beautiful town. It's an amazing visual place.
Yeah, no, definitely. Obviously, this summer has been tragic in BC in general, and nowhere more so than Lytton. And so we're excited to have the screening to be able to, do our tiny little part in rebuild. But it's not a community I know super well, but my understanding is they're super resilient and they're committed to rebuilding, bigger and better. And I think that's awesome. And they're gonna still have that location, that beautiful location, and so that community will rise. But yeah, obviously it's a terrible change for sure.
I think if I made that film today, I would want it to have more in keeping with the Indigenous community there, in the sense that's the thing that's missing in the film in terms of how it represents Lytton. You know what I mean? That is very much it's a powerful Indigenous place, the confluence of the rivers. You learn all that from going and being there. I was transposing what was essentially an American story on a Canadian landscape. And so, we stayed with so many of the topics and issues that were there in the initial script and tried to kind of bring it into a Canadian set. But looking at it now, that would be the part of the culture of that town that's really kind of missing in the movie. But you can't do everything all the time,
Yeah. Did you, going a little bit back to casting, did you use much of the locals, as extras and that sort of thing?
Definitely. Yeah. We had a few fairly biggish scenes that revolved around it was sort of a riff on my hometown of Edmonton, Klondike days. So we had like a sort of the sense that there was a festival that happens every year in this not fictional town, but in Lytton. I'm not sure what their actual festival is, but we made a kind of riff on the sort of a Klondike themes or whatever. So we had scenes and different scenes throughout that needed kind of groups and people, and yeah, I had lots of help from the town, so that was great.
Yeah, that had to be interesting in and of itself.
Yeah.
On that note, what was your favorite scene to film?
I mean, it's not a nice scene, but I really like working on these kind of organic, crowd, messy, sort of violent scenes. There was a scene where the brother-in-law, who's sort of a racist jerk, comes to the party where Cole is at with his friend Frogger, and he starts making trouble. Um, and you know, it's like a bit of a you know, of a messy, kind of a sloppy, fighty, pushy, shovey sort of scene. But I love the way when you do it well, the camera gets really involved with the actors, and everything's a little bit freeform and improvised, and the script just kind of goes out the window, and you live in the moment of the scene and see what happens. And I think it works really well when it stands next to other scenes where there's a kind of precision in the way they're framed, the pristine nature of a shot that's tracking through landscape, and there's a kind of control in those scenes when you juxtapose those next to these slightly more chaotic, kind of looser scenes. That's kind of my favorite thing to do. I love seeing those things kind of explode on the screen. So, you know, it's a little movie, but there's a, you know, there's a lot of heart in it and a lot of truth in it. So that was one of my favorites.
Oh, very cool. And this is sort of one of those big, you know, when you're doing an interview with director questions, but what do you hope people take away from the film?
Well, I think the messages are pretty universal, right? Tolerance, understanding, patience with people. I even love the way, you know, there's a tendency, especially today, I think we challenge ourselves with topics that are heavy around race, around gender, around culture, and then we tend to kind of make them really two-dimensional, you know, black and white. Everything's kind of good guy, bad guy. You know, we're trying to make sort of feminist retellings of traditionally kind of male perspectives, and what we do is we just kind of flip the roles and make the same movie, you know. And I don't like that. I kind of feel there has to be a subtlety in the world, that's the real world, you know. And what I like in this movie is that even the character Bobby, who is a sort of hateful, spiteful redneck jerk, there are moments of pathos and moments of understanding, and I think that we need to have those moments of understanding with every character. It's not so simple. The more I grow old, the more I think the problems in the world are as much socioeconomic as they are gender and race. That there you can't take all these things away. That as long as we live in a world where a select few have everything and the rest of us have nothing, there's going to be problems, there's going to be conflicts. And when we see the way the environment is changing now with the world heating up, we see what it's done in BC, we see what it's done in Lytton, you know. And I think that these, you know, these challenges that we have, we you know, we can't face them with two-dimensional ideas. We're a human, there's a guy, famous guy named Buckminster Fuller, and his metaphor was always Earth is a spaceship. We're all on this spaceship. There's only one. It's a fantastic spaceship, and it has the capacity to go forever. And we can all be supported on the spaceship, but we're all part of it. We're all in this together. And this is a guy from the 1960s. We have to start thinking like that again. You know, human family.
Oh, for sure.
Take care of the ship.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like you say, we only have one. As much as people are trying to find us another one, it's not going to be as good as this one.
No.
Well, thank you again so much for your time. Thank you for sharing the film with us, to you and the producers. Before we let you go, just one sort of selfish Film Society question. What are you working on currently that, you know, might be ready for Film Festival 2022?
Well, I have to get it to you. It's a film we're gonna premiere this fall. We just finished it. It's a film about an African refugee who comes to Vancouver and kind of struggles a little bit. And I did a really great collaboration and co-write with the lead actor. Sort of been my thesis as a filmmaker, is to really try to find people whose lives speak to the story and really try to find a way to bring their real life into the story. So it's got that sort of born out of a documentary. It's a fiction, but it's an intimate film about a simple story about a woman's struggles in a new place. And I really think it's cool. It's called Evelyn, and I'll send it to you.
Excellent. Yeah, no, definitely keep us in mind. That sounds right up our alley
Cool.
for the film festival. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Carl. We really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing this wonderful film with us again. 11 or so years after we got to show it here the first time.
Thanks for showing it. I think it's a great idea. It's a really beautiful thought to put it together. Thanks so
Yeah,
much.
all credit goes to our board member Tom Friedman. It was his idea and an excellent one. So
Cool.
thank you again.
Well, thanks.